Thanks so much for coming back and continuing the conversation about reducing access to lethal means for veterans. I greatly appreciate you being back at the table here today. And so I thought what we'd do to start is just kind of reintroduce who you are and what your role is with the county, and maybe a little bit about where you've come from and what you've done. And then we'll talk a little bit more about the importance of reducing access to lethal means. So Tito, do you want to start?
Sure. My name is Tito Mendoza. I'm a housing specialist and social worker for Clackamas County Social Services and a Marine Corps veteran.
Nice. Thanks for being here.
David Diedrichson. I am a peer support case manager with Clackamas County Veterans Housing, and I served in the Army 1973-76.
Thanks for being here.
Dave Denny. I'm the Homeless Veterans Outreach case manager, and I retired from the Army 24 years.
Very nice. Well, thanks for being here. Really appreciate it. So I know we've talked a lot about these same topics, but I hope today that we can kind of drill down and really better understand what it might look like and actual conversations that might occur with veterans around reducing access to lethal means. So why is talking about reducing access to lethal means specifically with veterans, why is it so important?
The lethality.
What about it?
Using a weapon is 99% effective, and it doesn't offer a whole heck of a lot of options. What I think we've talked about in the past is the fact of knowing how to use a weapon is primary for veterans. Most veterans have had hands-on experience. So your question, why is it so important? Because it's an effective way of killing yourself.
I think also there's another factor that I look at is suicide in general. It's much higher than the national average to someone who's not in the service. So we do have a problem here, a systemic issue that we need to address. And why not have other veterans who know other veterans who are hurt, depressed. There's all kinds of different ways that lead to dying and killing themselves. We are probably the best people they need to talk to, and hopefully get them the right resources. And sometimes you are the right resources, just being with them to talk about what's going on right now.
So you're saying veterans talking to other veterans is really key.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And it opens up the door to make it less evasive sometimes. You want to keep things like that to yourself. I mean, we've talked about this in other discussions with suicide. It's something that you don't talk about, you just go and do it. With talking about it, which we are now coming out with great campaigns to talk about suicide, it minimizes that stereotype of suicide. And it's a little bit easier for a veteran to open up when he's talking to another veteran.
Can I ask why? Sorry, I keep cutting you off, Tito, but why is that, Dave? Like, why is it easier, you think, for a veteran to talk to another veteran? Why? Like, why? I'm a therapist in training. Why is it easier for you to have a conversation with a veteran than for me?
The biggest thing is what they've gone through, regardless if
Sure.
We're not talking about the killing themselves, but I do have a connection with him as being a veteran. I understand the stressors that are thrown at veterans when they're in the military, as well as when they come out of the service, and they have to now change their whole lifestyle to meet what is out there outside of the military life.
One of the things I'd like to add on to that is, and basically this is just repeating what David's been saying, we've chewed the same dirt. We've chewed the same sand. We've been where they're at. And while we might, there but for the grace, we'd be in the same situation. For some reason, we might have had more support when we came out than others might have. They might have stayed in their outside of their permanent duty station, whereas some of us went back home and were able to go back home.
Right.
And we had that support system. we're bringing a discussion that is uncomfortable to talk about. You know, so it's something that's for in the past has just been part of the shadows. We're trying to drag it back out into the light and just showing this is a problem. You know, it's not just something that is for civilians. It is a major problem with...
It's everybody's problem.
Exactly, exactly. With veterans, yes, we possess the knowledge on how to make it more lethal and be more successful at
Dying.
at completion.
And
of
it's,
this.
and it's really simple. I mean, it's something that we've done in the military, and we're not afraid to ask a soldier or a Marine or an airman, the Navy, what's going on in their life, because we are working with them on 24 hours a day sometimes. So the question can be anything. I could look over at David and say, "What color are your underwear?" You know, it's that simple. It's that easy. We can ask those type of questions across the board.
Like there's a precedent for that.
There's a precedent for that, and it becomes second nature just to ask that question right out, regardless of the consequences, because that's what we do in the military.
Is your gig line straight?
Is your gig line straight?
And for the most part, we'll ignore the flowery language, the clinical terminology. We'll just flat out say, "What's going on? Is there?"
So you get right to it.
We'll get right to it. You know, a lot of times we try to dance and tease out that information. No, not when you're speaking to another veteran. That rarely is the way you should approach it. Are you killing yourself? Are you planning on killing yourself?
So being direct, asking
Be
the
direct.
question.
Ask the question.
So here's a question for you. So I'm not a veteran, and I am a clinician. And so it's what I'm hearing from you all is that veterans can talk about those things. Veterans can ask questions that are really difficult because you have chewed the same dirt. So how does someone approach, how someone like myself or a non-clinician, because again, you just highlighted, Tito, that this work is everybody's responsibility because of the rate of suicide being so high, and the rate of suicide being even higher for veterans. So how does just the average person have these conversations with a veteran?
I think the trust. He needs to lean, or she needs to learn trust from you. And that's you being very upfront, forward, saying, "I don't know anything about your military life. You need to let me know what's going on." Or, you know, what does an acronym mean in the military, like MIRLS? What is that?
So trying to engage this person
engage-
and develop a relationship. Trust.
Exactly.
I have an
Yes.
example. Just recently, I took a veteran to his mental health appointment. And I knew he was struggling. I knew he'd been isolating. And on the way there, I could feel the tendency or the words that he was using could be suicidal. I didn't address it at the time, but I also knew that he had a concealed carry permit. After we got out and on the car ride back home, I asked him whether or not that was brought up, how they were addressing the isolation and just the struggling that he was going through. And yeah, you know, it's okay, he said, it's not too bad. And this is at a VA mental health appointment. I said, "Did you tell him about that you were thinking about killing yourself?" "Oh, hell no." And the question was pretty simple. And I said, "Why not?" Now here's the paradox of a clinician asking. He said, "What are they going to do with that information? I don't know where that information's going. If it's going into my health records, who's going to see that information once I disclose that I feel suicidal? Does that create a flag in my medical records? Does that mean that every single time that they see me, they are going to know that that's how I felt, so therefore they're going to direct the conversation in that way?" I don't want them thinking that that's what's going on every single time, and I sure as hell am not going to tell them that I have a weapon.
So this individual left the hospital after meeting with the mental health professional without
It was
being...
just at the CBOC. which
without
is a
being
community-based.
okay,
yeah.
without being assessed for suicide, really, and without having
He was asked.
He was asked.
Yeah, but he
But
wasn't.
he
gonna
wasn't
disclose that.
forthcoming because he didn't have the relationship and the trust.
Right.
And nor was there conversation about his access to lethal means.
I don't think he was even going to establish that trust, even though the clinician that he was working with has had multiple years working with veterans. He still did not feel comfortable, I think is the term. Now, we talked about it and we established, I don't know, you want to call them ground rules, but hey, you know what? If you're getting to that point again, text me, let me know. Or find another resource. There's got to be somebody out there, hopefully there's somebody out there that you trust enough to just let them know that you're struggling.
So what could that clinician have done differently to make that conversation have a different course?
I have one example on that.
Because I'd like to highlight things that actually work, because I
yeah.
want to give people some ideas of really how we need to be talking to veterans to actually have these complex, hard conversations, come out of the shadows.
Structurally, sometimes we're not allowed to be able to do things such as, let me sit in the room with a clinician, with that veteran, to support him. Because we've already had the conversation between, before he's going in to see the clinician, as far as, is he going to kill himself? Possibly. And if I go into that room, he can't hide that now from you, because I'm going to be looking at him or her, and he's going to be seeing that I'm looking at him or her and going, well, you better say what you're supposed to be saying to the clinician to get the help. So I've had that happen once.
So it's about trust with you, though, and that
Trust.
person. So you were able to sit in the room, because obviously you can't be in the room with a clinician unless the person wants you there.
Exactly.
So you're there because you've been invited to come in by the person you're trying to support.
And that is a relationship between a veteran and myself. You can do that, but if it's a cold call, an individual comes up to you, or I meet him out in the camps or at one of these shelters or centers, and I don't have any background information on him, all I can fall back onto is my connection with him as a veteran, and slowly develop that trust. And for the most part, after being in the military for 24 years, you learn how to read a person pretty well. I mean, I think a lot of us in this job learn how to look at somebody in their eyes and really see that there's something off. And then it's just a matter of just digging and, keep on asking those questions.
Kind of
Ask the
appealing.
questions, right?
Ask the
You're good
question.
at that.
Right? So why,
Wait, hold on a second.
yeah, go ahead.
Your question too was, what can a clinician do?
Or what can anybody do? I mean, again, I don't want to focus, the work of suicide prevention it is no longer, and I would argue it never was, the responsibility of mental health professionals solely. Right. It is the responsibility of everybody, no matter what your role is in this world, whether it's just identifying signs and symptoms and getting someone help, or calling the crisis line, or whatever. So I guess I would rephrase, what could that clinician or anyone do to really, and maybe it's the example of this clinician, what could this clinician have done? But what can anyone do to have these conversations so it's not just veteran to veteran that are having these complex, hard, crucial
For
conversations?
the general public, it's get trained. Understand how to hear the words. Everybody gives off an invitation, whether you hear it or not. When a person's really struggling, people give off phrases or body language that may lead you to ask questions like that. For clinicians, you're doing an assessment anyway. You're hearing words that trip your flag and are saying, ooh, this does not sound good. What am I going to have to do here? Do I have to ask them if they're going to kill themselves? And even if they do ask that question, you might not get the response that you're thinking. You may feel it's evasive. So you have to know your resources. You got to know your resources going in. Not only the resources that are out there in the community, Veterans Helpline, NAMI, a variety of different types of things that are out there, the VA, for example. But you also got to know where they can go, Fort Kennedy, where other veterans congregate, where veterans might be, and then ask them the question, is there somebody else that you trust? Is there another veteran that you know that you can trust enough?
And the question itself is not really the hard question here.
The question, are you thinking of killing
Are
yourself?
you killing yourself? it's a lot of times as if we're looking at who we're talking about is the case managers, the frontline individuals. It's really about the unknown, and he just hit the unknown, which is the resources. Once you identify where the resources are and where you can get the help, that unknown is not so scary anymore. Right. And I think that's where a lot of times case managers or any frontline person who meets up with a person who is in distress and wants to kill themselves don't know what to do after they ask the question.
Right.
The
Which prohibits people from asking the question because we don't know what to do.
And the other thing that some clinicians and social workers and whatnot tend to forget.
Easy now, I'm a social worker.
Tend to forget. No, I knew that. No, tend to forget is how to listen.
Yeah, that's very true.
Don't focus on the assessment so much as focus on what they're not saying, what they're saying. Believe it or not, veterans like to talk. They might not like to talk with someone that's not their brother or sister in arms, but they want that out. They've been holding it back for so long that they want that opportunity to take that. So you have to be ready to listen as well as be ready to ask the question. And okay, so now we're talking about this. Since you brought that up, then you ask a question, and then you ask another one, and hopefully at that point you get to what's going on with them.
And for the most part, I think also is this is probably not their first time dealing with a clinician or a mental health specialist. So they already know what questions you're going to ask. And so if a clinician stays in that pattern of asking those questions and it's from the book, he's going to read that or she's going to read that and they're going to shut down. And so sometimes it's you have to start identifying different ways of asking that question or those questions to assess a person.
Which is a great segue into, one of the things that I often think about, and we've actually talked about in previous discussions, is the words we use and language, and the importance of language, and that the words we use really make a difference in how we engage with people, how people trust us. So can you talk a little bit about the importance of the words that we meaning the people who are trying to better support veterans who might be struggling? Why is it important for us to use certain words and not use others? Why does language matter when talking to a veteran specifically around reducing access to lethal means?
Well, think about this. When we go in, we're trained up. We're trained to do a job.
When you go into the military?
When we go into the military, we're trained. We're trained to do a specific job. It involves a variety of different equipment. It involves a mission. When we get out, we're not really trained out. While you're in, if you're struggling with anything at all, mentally, physically, emotionally, physically you go to the doctor. Mentally and emotionally, you don't go to the psych tent. Oh, no, 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 no. You are automatically the weakest link in the chain. Everybody knows now that you can't pull the weight and they can't count on you.
So that stigma is so pervasive.
So when you get out, you're not trained out to be able to depend on community resources.
Or ask for help.
Exactly. Why would you ask for help? And just like the veteran that I just spoke about, what are they going to do with that information? So the language is very simple. I'm not a veteran. Help me understand what's happening for you. Help me understand who can you go to. How can I get a better understanding of what the conversation should be for you?
I love the transparency in that, like the simplicity of saying, I'm not a veteran and I want to be able to be of support. Help me understand what you might need. Help.
We don't use the word help. You can use support. You can use
again, language
just
matters.
about anything else because veterans don't want to be helped. I mean, I've had similar conversations. I don't want a handout. Well, I'm not giving you a handout. I'm giving you a hand up. I'm here to support you. I'm here to stand beside you. So language, as we've talked about, is probably the first line of getting to know somebody that served. I mean, you've got multiple examples of how to use language as a tool for getting to know somebody and making that connection.
One of the things that you touched on is in the military, you have this organized structure. It can be chaotic structure, but it's structure. When we get out, we no longer have that feeling of being part of something bigger than ourselves. So even though we were able to interact with civilians while we were in, on a psychological basis, we knew that they were there. But once we got out, we're now what?
Now what?
And so we don't know who we can trust. You know, my brothers are gone, my sisters are gone. I've got family, but I don't want to burden them. And that's something that you're going to hear. Burden. I don't want to hurt them. So
Or someone's worse off than I am. Provide the help to that individual.
Oh gosh, how many
So
times?
that's what you've encountered. People are saying like, I don't need your support or help, whatever word we want to use. You know, I'm not as bad as so and so over there.
I still got all my limbs.
I don't think we can
I
count the
came
number of
back.
times we've heard that one. And it is, on face value, it does make sense to me, and I think the rest of us. Yeah, I can imagine myself saying that. I don't want to burden anybody. And again, for me, it goes back to the same thing of I'm the weakest link. The minute I say, I need your help, I'm letting everybody else know that I served with that may see me in the future, I couldn't handle it.
They can't count on me.
Well, now I'm out in civilian life, I can't handle it.
So how do we, just to pick up on Dave, how do we, it sounds like you all are nodding your head that you've had individuals who say, oh yeah, I'm not, you know, help, I'm not that bad, I have all my limbs, I'm not injured, I'm not physically injured. What do you say to that individual who you know is demonstrating signs and symptoms
I value
of suicide?
I value his response. I say, okay, I understand that, but we use the acronyms, I got your six. That is an acronym that's being used. I got your six means I got your back. I've got your rear. And 6 o'clock on a clock is the bottom side. So I've got your six. And that comes back to way back in the early years of fighting, when you're in a foxhole and you're having to face one direction and your buddy has to face another direction to keep you alive. And it's about that, keeping you alive. So I have your six. Express that you do understand, regardless of how small or little the problem is in front of you, that you've got that for him. And also just make sure that you also do not put any negative in-state to the discussion. Everything's positive. We're going to work through this problem, and here's the plan. And never discuss or talk about the law enforcement's going to take your weapons away from you. You know, if you tell us that you're suicidal and you want to kill yourself, because there's that Second Amendment right that we hold strong and hang on to. A lot of us do, and say, you're not taking my weapon away from me. If he does open that topic up, and we can talk about, well, let's get the locks and put some locks on the triggers, or do you have another veteran that can safeguard your weapon? We're going to put it into the arms room. We are so used to using that language of after you're done on a mission, putting your weapon in an arms room, and it's going to be in a safe place. Like I want you to be in a safe place until we get through this, and then you can have your gun back, your weapon.
The other thing too that's important, and we talked about it a little bit, trust is a big issue. Don't make any promises that you sure.
So the person supporting
Yes.
this individual should never say,
don't make
I
any
promise.
exactly that this is going to happen, and you can't come
fulfill
through.
it. Yeah.
Exactly. Just tell them. You know what? This is going to be a long process. We're going to try to get through it as best as we can, and if I don't know something, I'm going to find that out. That's one of the things that we were taught to tell our commanding officer, sir, I don't know the answer, but I will find out. You're going to get that information if you don't have it yourself. be honest. Don't make any promises you can't keep. And understand that, you know what, you're in it for the long haul. And the last thing that veterans want to hear or experience is, okay, we're going to get you to this person, this person, this person. We've already probably been handed off to multiple people.
Right.
You want to have some kind of consistency. So if there is going to be a warm handoff, make sure that that's part of the plan. So this is what's going to happen. I'm going to be with you until we get to this point, and at some point we might have to, you might progress with somebody else. Just letting you know. But ideally, we'd like to just have some continuity, because a lot of veterans might not have a large support network, and you might be it. You might be the first for some.
Following up on what Dave said about weapons and language, what you've been talking about, one of the things that we know, let me back up a second. In the civilian community or in the clinician community, I think when you hear somebody say, I've got a weapon or I have a concealed carry permit, their mind automatically goes to the worst case scenario. Oh my God, you've got a gun. Oh, and now you're in fear or whatever it is. But that's almost the end of the conversation, because now it's not only an assessment, but now we got to figure out what to do about the fact that you have a gun. Weapon is how we call it.
Wait. So you call it a weapon?
We call it a weapon. We might slip and say gun, but if they do, but it's a weapon to us.
So when we're talking about language matters,
Yeah.
and words, weapon is the
and
preferred
sometimes
term.
I think if I remember right, I said both.
Yeah,
so sometimes I catch myself using other language, because sometimes I'm not running into a veteran when I'm out doing outreach. So I try to use multiple ways, so I'm sure that I'm capturing what I need to capture when I'm talking to a person.
Know your audience.
Know your audience. Okay, yeah, keep
So
going. Sorry.
going on that, when you're trying to explain to somebody, a clinician or somebody in civilian, it's hard to train them to understand the personal nature that a veteran has with their weapon. When they're in, many times that weapon is their lifesaver.
And it has a name.
It has a
right?
name. It has a name. You call it whatever it is, but you take care of that weapon.
So your weapon has a name.
It very well could.
It could, okay.
You could call it whatever you want, but that weapon is what's going to save your life. If you're in a combat situation or you're being trained, that weapon is the most important thing for you. So all of a sudden you're feeling in a bad place, but you still have that relationship with that weapon. That again goes back to the lethality of why are weapons so effective. Well, this is going to get me out of here. I've trusted this weapon for this many years. So having the conversation with another veteran when you realize that they may want to kill themselves and they're going to use their weapon is, tell me about your weapon. Tell me about the relationship that you have with that weapon. Now, it might not be something that a civilian or a clinician who hasn't got a good understanding of that would have. That's why knowing the resources, but what I've done in the past, when's the last time you went to the range? When's the last time you cleaned your weapon? When's the last time you took it apart? When's the last time? A lot of different things. So you're creating a relationship not only with the veteran, but you're trying to create the relationship and the connection with their weapon. And you're making it normalized.
Yeah.
So what David was saying, so a clinician might go, oh my God, he's got a weapon. Whereas you can go ahead and say, well, I'm not worried about it because I know you know how to take care of it. I know you know how to use it. So I'm not worried too much about it right now. So let's go and talk about something else over here, and let's normalize that conversation. Let's make it a part of the conversation without making it the focal point.
We might even talk about, hey, what kind of weapon is it? Hey, did you ever shoot a 16? Did you ever shoot a SAW? Did you ever use a 50? And have a conversation around the fact that weapons are normalized.
And I put the weapon into the conversation towards the end. you know, if it's a cold, like we were out doing some outreach at some camps and ran across a gentleman who was out in a camp, way out in the woods, and you know, it's all about the approach, talking to him, you treat him like a human being. He seemed to be discouraged about a lot of other things. Don't know where that will lead, but you know, at the end, you know, I'm asking, do you have anything to keep you safe out here? Do you got a gun or knife? You know, you never know what's out here. You know, you're all by yourself. It'd be other humans. And that happens, you know, or animals. So do you have something to protect yourself? And they'll tell you if they have a gun or a knife. And then you can go into that conversation about the gun or weapon, on what do you use it for, and how often do you clean it, and you know, hey, can I see? Try not to say, hey, can I see it, because
Right.
yeah,
Because they just might.
because you don't want to capture them in a false a statement, because sometimes they may say that as a defense mechanism to keep you at bay. I don't want you near me, so I do have a gun, and then you ask to see it, and they can't produce it. Now you've just lost all your credibility,
Credibility.
and trust with that individual.
Right.